First things first, my name is Daniela Martin, and I'm joining from the Institute for Methods Innovation, which is a nonprofit organization working to advance the use of evidence in real-world decision making. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by Sarah from IMI as well, and Chrysostomos from Citizens in Power, which is also a nonprofit organization, but they are based in Cyprus. And yeah, I'm sure that Chrysostomos will also be talking about their work when the time comes. But I want to just give a brief moment for Sarah and Chrysostomos to introduce themselves as well before we start the whole session.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Sarah Noles. I'm a research and training officer here at the Institute for Methods Innovation. So I work on a lot of EU projects, a lot of them focusing on ethical engagement and yeah, participation of citizens, but other kinds of stakeholders and really looking at how to yeah, best enable participation to so that it has positive outcomes across different groups.
And I am Chrysostomos Pepos. I represent Citizens in Power organization. I'm a senior project manager and researcher at the organization. I'm also coordinating and managing various EU-funded projects from different funding schemes like Erasmus Plus, Horizon, and SERV. And here at Citizens in Power, we do a lot of citizen science as a methodology in our projects, as well as stakeholder engagement, and we'll have the chance to delve a bit deeper later on in my presentation and in the session. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you both. And also, if you would like the people being here, if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat, that's also very welcome. We always like to know who's here. Okay, so I will start with a really short introduction to FEMLEAD and then the framing for today's session. Then Sarah will take us a little bit into an introductory section for today's session, and then Chrysostomos will have the main discussion on how to engage communities responsibly and inclusively. And after that, we will have a hands-on activity using the worksheet that we have prepared for you today. So very quickly, what is FEMLEAD? FEMLEAD is your EU-funded project that involves 5 partners across 5 countries. And the project focuses on supporting women's participation, and leadership in open science, particularly in STEM and higher education institutions. So a central idea behind the FEMLEAD project is that good policy is not enough on its own because institutions also need training, they need practical tools, they need networks, and they also need ways to connect or to turn commitments into daily practice. So through the project, we are developing different resources, such as something that it's called the Virtual Learning Lab, which is like it's a self-paced online course that I will be sharing with you afterwards in the email that I will be sending to everyone. And this is also to help higher education institutions to make inclusive open science more concrete. So instead of just having like this abstract policies, to actually turn them into concrete actions. Okay, so I'm gonna give the microphone now to Sarah, and yeah, there you go, Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to frame this session, we thought we'd take a look at why it's important to focus on the ethics of engagement in the first place. So open science widens who can reach and use research, but wider access doesn't automatically mean that the participation of different parties is fair. Engagement can still be unequal or extractive, where communities give time and knowledge, but receive little back, or receive something back that isn't meaningful to them or aligned with their values or what they actually want out of their participation. So with that in mind, ethical engagement is simply the effort to maximize the benefit of this work and the value participants in the way that they need, and minimize harm throughout the process. So unlike research ethics, which most of us know well, the ethics of engagement and impact are easy to overlook and rarely have set procedures to follow, whereas research ethics kind of already have those procedures set in place. And the reason that there are rarely set procedures to follow is because it requires thinking really deeply from different angles about the specific people that you're involving in your engagement and impact processes, the context that they're coming from, and what matters to them throughout the process. So that's what the rest of this session is going to focus on, is like how you can look at those things through different angles. So it helps to separate these two kinds of ethics. So research ethics is about protecting participants during a study through things like informed consent, privacy, and avoiding harm in the research itself. Most institutions already have committees and clear processes for this. Engagement and impact ethics is different. This concerns what happens around and after the research, how benefits are developed for the communities that you're trying to benefit, who is involved, and how outcomes are shared. So today we're focusing on this second kind of ethics, engagement ethics. And the questions are simple to kind of state and ask yourself, but really can be quite difficult to answer well. So who is involved, who benefits, and who might be harmed? When we look at why some engagement works and some doesn't, three key things tend to kind of explain a lot of it. So the first is context, and involves looking at the social context, the economic context, and the cultural conditions that people live in, which can shape who can take part in a process at all. The second is design. So this is about the choices that we can control throughout the engagement processes that we do, such as the timing, when do we organize these processes? Is it right at the start, or later on in a research process? How much time are you asking from different people? The format is really important. So is it online? Is it in person? How much participation is actually invited throughout this the process? Language considerations and also accessibility and access considerations are all part of the kind of design element of engagement. And the third aspect is power. So whose knowledge is treated as valid and who is given a seat at the table to make the decisions. So context is the backdrop that we inherit and have to understand. Design is what we choose to do to adapt to that context. And the power dynamics dictate who gets to decide what shifts as a result of these processes or doesn't shift as a result. So this is where equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility come in. So equity is all about fair access and fair outcomes, which is not the same as treating everyone identically. We have to recognize where there are different needs for everyone to be able to have that fair access and fair chance to shaping an outcome. Diversity is about having a genuine range of voices and methods in the room. Inclusion is about the conditions that make people feel heard and actually able to shape the work, not just be there. So it's like what actually happens in the room, what is going to make people feel comfortable and able to put their perspective forward, and for that to be recognized and validated. And accessibility is about removing the practical barriers that different kinds of people might face to taking part. And that might be in terms of language, in terms of format, or in terms of any technology that is used within an engagement or impact process. So it's important to consider all of these four things together because it's possible for a process to be diverse, but not necessarily have the conditions in the room to maximize inclusion of different people. Or it could be open but still inaccessible for some people. So really need to think about all these four aspects at the same time.
Okay, so now it's time for Chrysostomos. And before he starts, I just want to say two things. One is that I forgot to mention that we will be sending all the things that we're going to be sharing today, and that includes the slides and the worksheet. So you don't have to worry about taking screenshots or writing down stuff. And the second is that I'm going to be sharing with you the link to the worksheet in the chat right now, so that you download it while you listen to Chrysostomos' presentation and you're ready for when the time comes for the practical activity, okay? So Chrysostomos, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. More or less, we've covered me as well, but in any case, I'll just go a bit deeper on some parts and I'll provide some examples of what we did and what we actually do here at CIP. Now, this is what we're going to cover today. We'll start with some definitions so we can share a common language, then build to the ethics and the inclusion arguments, and then we will give 6 concrete moves and finish how we actually apply those things in projects or initiatives that we have participated or organized throughout the years. Now, we'll need to know what is open science. There is one definition from UNESCO, which says that it's the first global standard agreed by virtually in every country, and open science has these 4 pillars. Pillar 1, it's the open knowledge. It is what most people think of: open access papers, open data, open software. Pillar 2 is the infrastructure that makes that possible. The two that matter the most for us today are Pillar 3 and Pillar 4. Open engagement of societal actors is literally where the public enters science, what we call citizen science, and some other forms is volunteering or crowd sourcing. Pillar 4 is dialogue with other knowledge system like indigenous, local, or marginalized knowledge. So open is not only a publishing question. That is the door that we will walk through for the rest of the talk. And now open science is already in EU practice. For example, in Horizon Europe project, you have to have open access to the publications, most of the publications that you're producing. So this is an open science practice. And EU policy also actively encourages citizens and community engagement because it increases the trust and the real world impact of research. But here is the catch and the whole point. Open is not automatically inclusive. You can publish a dataset to the world and still have built it with a narrow or privileged group, for example, who set all the questions. Closing that gap is a deliberate design choice. And here in CIP, we work a lot with citizen science. To be honest with you, we are trying to include citizen science as a methodology, even if we do not kind of say it clearly in our projects. But we try to engage people to help us implement science. So citizen science is the clearest, most practical route to community engagement. And like a simple definition is the voluntary participation of the public in genuine research. The key is on the left that people can join at any stage, not only as free data collectors, but in setting the question and interpreting what the result means. The ladder on the right is the part to internalize contributory projects use the public to gather data someone else designed. Collaborative shares, co-created, means that the community helps set the questions and shares decisions throughout. And as you climb the ladder, you share more power, which is more inclusive, but also more ethically demanding because now you are accountable to the people you work with. Most projects sit slow on this ladder. The ethical opportunity is to move up deliberately. And if you have previously worked throughout citizen science as a methodology, it is certain that you came across with these 10 principles that the European Citizen Science Association set back in 2015. And I can quickly go through them, but instead of that, I have grouped them. For example, principles 1, 3, and 4 are about meaningful involvement and mutual benefit. People are partners, not unpaid censors. And then we group principles 2, 6, and 9, which means it must be real science with biases managed and impact evaluated. And the coral ones are the heart of my speech here today, which is principle 5, give participants feedback. Feedback is always welcome and needed. Principle 7, which is make data and results open and acknowledge citizen scientists by name at principle 8. And principle 10 is to handle the legal and ethical issues, which is intellectual property, attribution, and confidentiality. And openness without ethics can deepen, of course, inequality. This is, for example, who takes part, who decides, who is excluded, and whose knowledge counts. If you only ask the first one, and then the answer is always the researchers, then you don't really have community engagement. When you skip these questions, four predictable harms may appear. The so-called parachute or extractive research is when you fly in, take the data, and then fly out. And the community, what it gains? Nothing. This is a common mistake sometimes by researchers that they just want to be professionals and do their work as efficient as possible. Then tokenism, when people are in the room or the photo but have no actual say. So they're kind of participating, but not, deeply participating. Exclusion, when the people that are most affected by an issue are exactly the ones who don't take part in that solution because of maybe time or cost or language barriers or even disabilities sometimes. And constant and privacy harms, data collected or published without genuine information consent. The uncomfortable truth is that doing this badly while calling it open can widen the very gaps we claim to close. And ethics is what prevents that. Also, it is really important to say who is missing from research. And this is one solution, one problem that the FEMLEAD project is trying to resolve, which I'll just skip this slide since we have also talked for the FEMLEAD project, but of course we are more than welcome to visit the website of the project and find out the solutions that we are proposing. And here is the practical core of my presentation, which is these 6 moves for responsible, inclusive engagement. The first one, and one of my favorite ones, is the co-design from the really start. The single biggest shift in involving people in framing the question, not just collecting the data. which responds to the principles that I have previously shared, 1 and 4. The second move is to lower the barriers on inclusion, lower the barriers. For example, inclusion is logistics, which means that we need to have flexible timing, remote participation, childcare, plain language, and accessible formats. If only people with spare time and confidence can join, then we have pre-selected a privileged sample, which this is the unfortunate truth sometimes. Move 3 is the consent and data done right. Informed and ongoing consent, GDPR compliance, always, that's a must. Fair data, and giving the community a real say over that data, because most of the times they are the ones that are collecting that data. And move 4 is closing the loop. Tell participants what they contribute led to in a format they can use. Move 5 is give credit. It's give them credit, the credit they deserve. So we shall name them, which that responds to principle 8. And recognition is both ethical and also motivating, of course. And the final move is to reflect on power and evaluation. Keep asking who is still missing. Watch for unintended harm and measure real impact. We should always measure this real impact. And they are mostly about intention and planning. And what we did here in Citizens in Power, those 3 projects, they are EU-funded projects that appear on our screens right now, is CITSI for All, Haiti, and MAD project. I would like to stand especially at CITSI for All projects, since I was the one managing that project at that time. So the project was really innovative for its time, because it gave a voice to people from the deaf and hard of hearing community and adults in learning about climate change. And what we did was to involve them in citizen science projects for climate change. And here in Cyprus, they have helped scientists to observe how butterflies move. For example, if how oftenly they fly here in Cyprus, and what the species are, just to track and see if we have some species that migrated from countries due to climate change. And it was quite a success. The people from the deaf and hard of hearing community loved it and participated from the very beginning of the project. So we have consulted them on how to implement those, and they really feel welcomed. And that they were not excluded from the actual, science. And through that, we have built another list of projects, and we have collaborated with them in the future. For example, this is a really important slide, which is a pre-engagement checklist. Before we involve a community, what we need to have in mind. Have we involved the community in framing the question? Can the people most affected actually take part? Is consent informed, voluntarily, and ongoing? Who owns the control of the data? How will give feedback and share the results? Who is still missing and why they're still missing? How are the contributors named and credited? And how we will evaluate the impact and avoid the harm. And finally, 5 things to remember is that open science means opening the whole process, not just access to paper and data. Also, citizen science is the most direct, practical route to engaging the communities, and that's why over the past years it's still growing and growing. And inclusion and ethics are design choices made early, not afterthoughts, of course. 6 moves make it real: co-design, access, consent, feedback, credit, and reflection. And the last one is that CIP experience actually show it works when communities lead science get better and fairer. And that's it from my side. I guess after we can have a discussion if you have any questions or remarks.
Yes, thank you, Chrysostomos. And I was just going to mention to everyone here that this is the third webinar within a webinar series that we have been facilitating for the FEMLEAD project. But we do also have more resources coming from IMI and from Fast Track Impact and from CIP that we will be sharing with you, because this topic connects to many other specific and very relevant topics, such as, well, how do you decide who to include, right? Well, for that, you need to do an inclusive stakeholder analysis, and we do have a lot of resources for that. So after the webinar, I'm going to be sending you the email with the slides, with the resources, but also I'm going to give you the links to the previous webinars, the previous worksheets, so you can get a sense of the other things that you need to take into consideration. So before we go into the practical hands-on side of the session, this is the time now. If you have a specific question or a comment or even something that was very interesting to you, having heard from Chrysostomos and from Sarah.
Thank you for these presentations. Really, really enjoyed them. And I'm delighted that you have talked about the citizens being involved in question setting. Well, I would argue that citizen science, as wonderful as it is, and I do advocate for it, is not the only direct or the best direct method of engaging audiences. But my point I'd like to ask is about not just engaging citizens in the question setting, but in the ethics setting. So could we not involve them in answering those questions that Chrysostomos was putting up and that Sarah was challenging us with? And I'm just open to the speakers, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can respond to that. I think it's a really good point. And I think a crucial part of recognizing that co-design isn't just about the theoretical kind of research questions, but true, like fully fledged co-design would reach into looking at perhaps the kind of governance frameworks for research projects, and the other kind of technical aspects that would require, or would, if done truly inclusively, would require a kind of diverse set of perspectives on setting the parameters for these kinds of things. I think it's a really good point.
I'm gonna read a message in the chat. Thank you for the presentation. Do you have insights to share on co-creation or citizen science depending on the scientific field? I have heard about it in sociology or ecology, for example, but very little in biology, which could be because of access to experimental facilities, etc. So I don't know if Sarah or Chrysostomos, have you had experience in more technical fields?
If I can speak for CIP and for me, no. But for social sciences sector, it's still an upcoming methodology which is not widely used. And as a matter of fact, this year we have submitted some proposals to test citizen science in the social sciences sector, which is my sector. But in more technical fields, no. What we have done mostly was observations and tracking for climate change purposes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the IMI side, I was thinking of a project that we currently have about rare earth elements. So it's a very, very technical project working with engineers, chemists, this sort of thing that we usually don't understand that much about it. And we do have co-creation processes, but to be honest, they are not being implemented from the outset. So it's not like, hey, let's bring citizens and let's think about the question about which elements we need to take out of the earth and then how to process it. It's more like, okay, so we have the technical process, the chemical process. Now we're going to have a co-creation process with the citizens, with the people who might be using the outputs or the final products that would come from it. And let's understand what would be the best way for them to access those products and which uses would they find more useful for them in their daily lives. So it is a co-creation process, but it's depending on the stages, I would say, of the research and to what extent they can actually provide their input in a more technical sense. Sarah?
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads nicely onto Kimberly's question, which was around how early people should or need to be involved in question setting. So they have a question where they're going to be exploring participatory-based research, but the initial idea is generated by them in order to get the initial starting funding for it. And I think that's yeah, there's definitely a consideration needed around depending on the topic, how much information is kind of needed to be given to participants initially in order for them to meaningfully participate. I remember a project from a colleague described where it was kind of full co-creation right from the outset because they thought that was the kind of best practice, but actually participants didn't react too well to that because it was so technical and they felt that they needed some kind of information, some kind of one-way information to begin with in order to then feed back. So yeah, it's maybe a question of how early is meaningfully possible for participants rather than kind of full participation right from the beginning, regardless of the context or the topic.
Yeah, and I think that relates to Kimberly's question in the chat. Well, she's asking, well, I wonder how early people should need to be involved in question setting. Because, for example, they have a question that they're going to be exploring with participatory-based research, but the initial idea has been generated by them in order to get the initial starting funding for it, which is perfectly fine. That's how the system works. I think in this case, it's more related to how you are designing your research. So, for example, if you are working on a proposal, and of course you need the funding to actually go into the participatory or co-creation process. If you include that methodology in your research, then you can then justify and say, well, I got the funding for it. This is the core idea, but of course it's going to be adjusting or adapting to participants depending on what we get during the co-creation process. So Kristen, I don't know if you turn on your camera to ask something, but please go ahead.
I did, yes, so that it worked. Thank you very much for the insights and for the chance to take part today. I'm always really curious about ways to ensure that citizens actually benefit, which you have stressed very clearly, and thank you for that. And especially in places where the research process or the research outcome might not directly be relevant to their particular lives or to them personally. And I'm well aware that this is very much a case by case and project by project consideration. So I'd just be curious to hear how you factor this in for the Butterfly project with deaf citizens, and maybe even for the Rare Earths project. If you could talk a bit about that, I would be really curious.
Thank you, Kristen. So it was our first citizen science experience back when we did the Butterfly project, and we tried to identify a way on how to teach people from the deaf community what climate change is actually. and how they can learn more about it and understand it. So they can transfer also this knowledge to their children and so on. And we did a mapping in Cyprus, and after we have identified the several citizen science projects that were running at that period, we sat down with them, and together we have decided on which was the most interesting project for them. And since some of them lived in urban areas, not so much in the city, we have decided that they have decided, along with us and the people who ran the project at that time, that was the most interesting project for them to work on, because they told us that indeed, since they live in the mountains, they have identified some different species of butterflies that they never seen before, and they were recalling from their early years, for example, but they didn't know the reasoning why that was happening. So when we sat down and together and explained them, we climate specialists, or because they migrate because of the hot weathers in Africa and so on. They were amazed by it, and so they jumped in the project together with us.
Yeah, and in terms of the rare earth elements project that I was talking about, it is still a work in process because we haven't got to the stage where we have actually facilitated any co-creation process. The first one that is going to start in the coming months are co-creation processes, but with technical stakeholders, like with managers, with other engineers, with business people. And then by the end of the project, because this is how it was designed from the outset, is that the co-creation processes with the citizens, or with I don't like to use the word lay people, but in this case, let's say citizens. It's more about getting information and working with them about how to co-create a relevant communication strategy. So how do we communicate what we already have, the results, and how do we communicate it efficiently to the people that will be using this? But in any case, for example, in the ethical aspect, is that right at the beginning of the project, the stakeholder analysis was conducted. And in that stakeholder analysis, we also identified the people who could be negatively affected. So not just the people who have the power to impact the research or to block it or to enable it, but also the people who would be affected, because we also need to take that into consideration. And of course, depending on the results of the stakeholder analysis, then we are taking the decisions. But yeah, I'm gonna share with you, of course, the website of this project that I'm talking about, that it's called RemHub. And as soon as we have more information, I'm sure that we will be sharing it on social media for sure. Just very quick, Miriam is talking about public and patient involvement. So how about paying for PPI contributors prior to getting funding? PPI contributors need to be paid, and researchers need to demonstrate PPI involvement for grant applications, but there are no funds to do this in the pre-application stages. So talking about this and the second question, I'm going to be sharing with you the recording and the worksheet of the last webinar, where we actually talked about how it is talked about open science and the importance of involving people in research. But sometimes the actual resources, like institutional resources, are not enough or do not exist, like for this. I don't know, Sarah or Chrysostomos, this is very niche, but have you had any experience with PPI and this sort of thing of being a requirement for getting funding, but then there's no institutional infrastructure or resources to actually allow this?
From my side, no.
Yeah, not on PPI specifically, but in terms of the general issue of not having funding at the pre-application stage to do community involvement. I think one approach to this is to within a proposal to kind of have to program in community or stakeholder involvement at an early stage of the research project so that it is funded. And of course, you're going to need some kind of draft research questions or topic within the proposal, but programming in that that engagement within the research project itself so that it definitely is funded is one approach that can be taken here. Yeah.
Thanks. It was just prior to actually, as Daniela said, like it's actually prior to getting the funding. How do you even have those groups to be able to say, let's talk about this question, you know, because you need a couple of workshops and it's quite expensive. You know, so I'm just wondering, like, I mean, you mightn't even know the answer. I was just putting it out there because it is a tricky one. Thanks.
Thank you, Miriam. Yeah, I mean, and as you say, it is complex because it depends on the institution you're working at, the kind of funding scheme you're applying to. Also relates to what Myri is saying in the chat, that sometimes it's just as easy as asking your senior manager to, hey, can you give me just a few euros to do this? And sometimes they will say yes, sometimes they will say no. But yeah, it's very very specific to the institutional settings and available infrastructure and resources for sure. So
Super.
yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen really quick. I do realize that we only have 15 minutes left, which is great. I actually love that we got this moment to go through some questions and comments. And yeah, so the link that I share with you in the chat, if you scroll up, you will see a Google Doc link. It's for this worksheet that you see on your screen. So I'm not going to ask you to work on the 3 sections that I was planning on asking you to work on today, because we only have 15 minutes left, and I would like us to take that those few minutes to actually focus on the thing that would be more relevant to us. But anyway, so this is the worksheet that you will see. Don't worry, it can be overwhelming at first, but that is because we added a lot of information, so you're able to use it afterwards. So you will see that the general instructions for the worksheet are on the first page. And in summary, during the next, let's say, 10 minutes, we will try to focus on just the first 3 sections. And the aim for you right now, for the next 10 minutes, it's not to produce, of course, a full engagement strategy. Your goal should be just to identify who should be involved or considered and what may stop meaningful participation based on your own assumptions. Of course, these need to be tested against reality. Okay. So after the session, the idea is that you can then return to this worksheet and then complete the remaining sections, focusing on where trust and fairness could be a risk or what safeguards are needed. Okay, so for the first section, you can actually just focus on I would say that the first 2 rows is just to define the engagement case you're working on. So try to choose a real initiative. It can be an open science project, a public engagement activity, a consultation. The important thing here is for you to keep it specific, because the worksheet will work best when you're thinking about one concrete activity and not like a whole institutional strategy. So start by noting the purpose in simple terms. What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to make more open, more usable, more accountable, or more collaborative? And then you will see that there is a space there for you to think about the intended participant users, then the expected form of engagement, and if you have thought about the data and consent procedures. If you haven't, that's also a relevant answer, because that will then lead you to think, oh, okay, so maybe we should think about informed consent and GDPR regulations and things like that. Kimberly, really quick, yes, of course, the worksheet is public, it's open, so please go ahead and share it with whoever you think might find it useful. Then the second section will ask you to look beyond the obvious participants that you already have in mind, because what we have been talking about right now, right, where when we think about designing engagement, we usually think about the people that we want to invite, right? And that is useful, but that is usually not enough, because as we were mentioning, ethical engagement also means about thinking about who may be affected, who may be excluded, who may act as a trusted route, and also who has a responsibility for making the activity work. So start with direct participant or users, and then think about, for example, the intermediaries or trusted routes. Something that has been highly, well, that hasn't happened to us in our previous experiences, that these are essential because they already have existing relationships and they have the trust that sometimes the research project team does not yet have. So it's very important to think about the intermediaries here. And then any institutional actors or decision makers. And finally, the groups that are likely to face barriers. So these can be people that are usually missing from this kind of activities, or people who may need extra support to really participate meaningfully in the activity. So you do not need to solve any barriers yet. You just need to name the groups here, okay? And the third section is about checking the design before recruitment. So this is for you to have some sort of guidelines. And this is for you also to be able to explain why some people could not take part right from the outset and instead of afterwards. So you do not need to complete every row. You can focus on the 2 or 3 barrier areas that are most relevant to your initiative. Okay, so we have a question from Kimberly. So has anyone has any experience in overcoming barriers caused by people being too busy or not having the time? For example, the being doctors and nurses, your target audience, that's complicated. And yeah, you have been getting very little buy-in, and they think but don't know that it's because they have precious little time. So, and this is open to everyone here also. If you have any experience with this, please let us know. I don't know if you, Chrysostomos, in any of the CIP projects, or you, Sarah, having worked with different groups in the past, if you have experienced this and if you have been able to overcome it as well.
Usually, people that are going to be involved in this kind of projects, they are interested on the thematic areas, and they will not find like excuses to be excluded from the procedure. However, it is really important from the very beginning to explain to the people, especially to the busy ones, what their contribution will be, to give them clear guidelines and have a clear strategy on how to do it, why are we doing this, and so on. So we avoid the busy schedules, excuses, and so on. But of course, it is a common thing. We are adults and we all have busy schedules, and yeah, sometimes they are a bit reluctant. But in any case, from our experience, is that when they're really interested, they will contribute no matter what.
Yeah, the other thing that I was going to say is that it also depends on the type of co-creation or participatory approach that you're using. It's, for example, with people working in health services, it can be really difficult to gather them all together at one place at one time. If you're I don't know, conducting a workshop or a webinar or something like that, that can be really difficult. But that's what Sarah was talking about, the design, because those are the choices that we have in order to accommodate the different needs of our stakeholders. So, for example, if you wanted to do a workshop, right, with this group of stakeholders, but you realize that it's going to be impossible to get them all together in one room at the same time, then maybe you need to rethink the approach. Maybe you need to do empathy interviews or one-to-one conversations, because that is a way that you can then adjust to their schedule and not the other way around. But yeah, it's very specific. It will also depend on the priority that the stakeholder has for your project. So if it has a very low priority, then probably it won't be, you don't need to spend that much time in trying to work it out with them. But if it's a very high priority stakeholder, then yes, you need to take the time to actually meet with them and find a middle ground. Mary is saying that she's also experiencing this with teachers, and totally. Well, Jamie, Zoom is a game changer. That's definitely what I was going to say. Like online formats are really, really useful. I remember where a project in the past we had with neurodivergent people, myself included, ADHD, and we had to adjust the format as well to be able to kind of have a workshop, but not being too long, but actually being engaging and then interactive. So the online formats are really, really good. I think that allows us to have more flexibility in terms of meeting with people. Yeah, so into a conference, they will be, for example, that is a really good idea. If you have identified a place or a space where they will be together all at the same time, then go for it, for sure. Just ask for 1 hour, and yeah, that's actually something that we will be doing in October. We will be having a consortium meeting for the rare earth elements project, and since we have people scattered all over Europe, we said, okay, let's have a co-creation engagement stakeholder workshop there, because everyone is going to be there. So that's definitely a very good route for that. Yeah, the strategy does not change the potential participant being busy, but one thing I find helpful in getting buy-in is scaffolding the ask as much as possible. Exactly. So, for example, Kritika, and I hope that I'm pronouncing your name correctly, she says, well, I try to tell them the expected time commitment of a call or event. And if I'm scheduling, I try to avoid back and forths by using Google Calendar appointment scheduler. That's very useful as well. You just let them know, like, this is my availability. Please choose whatever time slot works best for you. Then with this, you can include instructions and Zoom links and reminders, and calendar invites are automatic. Yeah, of course, this is gold. This is a golden advice for sure. Yeah, the scheduler, and Google has it. If you have a Zoom account, Zoom has it as well. You can create your own booking page. So for sure, use it. Okay, so we only have 1 minute left, and I do want to take a few seconds to thank you for joining. Thanks, Sarah. Thank Chrysostomos. We're going to be sharing everything with you afterwards, so don't worry. And before you leave, we really want to ask you to complete this short feedback survey. I just shared the link in the chat, because one, your responses will help us to improve future webinars that we organize. And second is that this is also going to support our project evaluation and the reporting. So we would be very happy to hear about what you thought about this webinar and about the worksheet and the insights that we have been talking about today. Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, everyone. It was really nice to see you all here, and we hope to see you again in future webinars. Hope you have a great rest of your day.